And ABC News has to hire an independent investigator to get to the bottom of this. And they have to answer one big question. How many children were raped in the last 3 years since they spiked this story?
How much low energy can people take? That feeling of helplessness that just on a daily basis, rather than alleviate itself with hope, with true righteous spirit, it seems to compound, metastasize, which only brings on more dark energy.
We even target people on our own side when they dare to question the party line. This path has brought us cruel sniping, deepening polarization, and even outbreaks of violence. I remember this path. It will not take us where we want to go.
Attracts dark energy, and you wonder how people can hold any hope. I've just had a link sent to me by Jimmy Deans, one of my subbers, so thank you very much for that link. And the story is revolving around an ABC anchor where there is now leaked footage from Project Veritas showing that the anchor in question was on a hot mic talking to the producer, explaining how this anchor had the story, the Epstein story, 3 years previous before it broke.
I've had the story for 3 years. I've had this interview with Virginia Roberts. We would not put it on the air. First of all, I was told, who's Jeffrey Epstein? No one knows who that is. This is a stupid story. Then the palace found out that we had her whole allegations about Prince Andrew and threatened us a million different ways. We were so afraid we wouldn't be able to interview Kate and Will that also quashed the story. She told me everything. She had pictures. She had everything. It was unbelievable what we had. Clinton, we had everything.
Had the interviews. All the allegations were backed up with documentative evidence and real-life people to back it up.
It's sick.
Because of pressure from Buckingham Palace, pressure from the TV station, and in some cases, pressure from Epstein's lawyer himself.
Do I think he was killed? 100%. Yes, I do. Because he made his whole living blackmailing people. There were a lot of men in those planes, a lot of men who visited that island, a lot of powerful men who came into that apartment.
It's sick. And ABC News has to hire an independent investigator to get to the bottom of this. And they have to answer one big question. How many children were raped in the last 3 years since they spiked this story?
How many victims suffered because of Epstein and his elite friends? That 3 years where this story could have broke, how many new victims were provided because of this?
It's a sickening and wicked scandal.
The mind boggles. The dark energy flows. And people, no matter what your class, no matter what your demographic, we are fighting one another. We are fighting one another.
It's sick.
Over our own narratives on what we feel is right and using things like this, my laptop, to point the finger at other people when, in the midst of it all, we have paedophilia that is establishment-based, that provide figures that would rock the mind. We have cover-ups that is establishment-based that we can't comprehend, we can't ascertain, but we know it's there.
Because, as Amy says, she had witnesses, she had victims, she had photographic evidence with a Bill Clinton connection and a British royal family connection. And ABC News said that that did not meet their editorial standards. What are those standards? I want them to come clean because they went after Brett Kavanaugh with 40-year-old hearsay, with no corroborating witnesses, no evidence, and a lot of that was furnished by Michael Avenatti, a scoundrel, a bankrupt tax cheat who brought forth gang rape allegations with no evidence. So what were those standards that allowed that to get on air? I'd like to know.
England, America, you name your country, there is celebrities, there is oligarchs, there is politicians, foreign dignitaries, you name it. Paedophilia on an industrial scale. We go to a march proclaiming Brexit, and the biggest low energy spike you could see within that is two morons brandishing a National Front flag, okay? A direct spike at black people within this country. That low energy will create waves not only for white people, but for black people. The true figure of the problem is establishment-based.
ABC and Robach released statements today essentially saying that the story wasn't ready for air. She said that, and they said that as well, not fully vetted. ABC has still not run, all these years later, and he's dead now, the original Robach-Jeffrey interview. Let's bring in Jesse Waters, host of Waters World and co-host of The Five. Jesse, what do you think about all this?
It's sick.
Yeah, I mean, and the suggestion that nobody knew who Jeffrey Epstein was, I mean, I don't know who these people are,
right,
but Jeffrey Epstein was, linked to many powerful people for years. I mean, he wouldn't be a household name necessarily, but that the executives at ABC in New York City had no idea who he was, I find very difficult to believe.
We as the common folk, we as small people thinking that we're doing something right, like Simon Sideways says, we have bought into this system where we are now picking ourselves off while the Epsteins, while the lawyers, while Buckingham Palace, while ABC and probably countless other media organisations are covering up the biggest crimes.
And it looks like the play was, we don't get access to royal family interviews on GMA.
Yeah.
Please. And you're not going to go protect children who are allegedly being sexually assaulted by God knows who and God knows where. And this is the Disney company? It's sick. The Disney company.
That's the only way to put it. The only way to put it. People of all faiths are being attacked, because the faith that is attacking it wants to believe that faith is righteous and good, and then gives it justification to go on the open attack against other faiths.
I was a blue-eyed, chubby-cheeked 5-year-old when I joined my family on the picket line for the first time. My mom made me leave my dolls in the minivan. I'd stand on a street corner in the heavy Kansas humidity, surrounded by a few dozen relatives, with my tiny fists clutching a sign that I couldn't read yet. Gays are worthy of death. This was the beginning.
Whether that be Christianity, Catholicism, Judaism, Islam, you take your pick. They all think they know best. They all believe that the other one is wrong. But yet the fundamental problem with them all, no one can truly verify the edicts of any of the ideologies. All hearsay, all books.
We even target people on our own side when they dare to question the party line. This path has brought us cruel sniping, deepening polarization, and even outbreaks of violence. I remember this path. It will not take us where we want to go.
But yet, people die because of it. People get abused because of it. People live second-class lifestyles because of it.
It's sick.
Our protests soon became a daily occurrence and an international phenomenon. And as a member of Westboro Baptist Church, I became a fixture on picket lines across the country. The end of my anti-gay picketing career and life as I knew it came 20 years later, triggered in part by strangers on Twitter who showed me the power of engaging the other.
Whilst you've got your Epsteins, you've got your people who he allowed onto his plane, on his island, doing the most sickest debauchery to children, to girls, to boys. And you could even go further as to say any abuse that is overt that we are witnessing is complicit behavior from these elites.
It's sick.
The dark energy roles. Yet, people cannot do anything about the divide and conquer, which is right in their face. They seem that their only reaction is to play the divide and conquer game. Whilst ABC anchor British royals threatened us a million different ways over Prince Andrew / Jeffrey Epstein story. So again, we're seeing the big true problem that has a trickle-down effect that makes paedophilia commonplace on our every streets, by all means, no matter the demographic.
In my home, life was framed as an epic spiritual battle between good and evil. The good was my church and its members, and the evil was everyone else. My church's antics were such that we were constantly at odds with the world, and that reinforced our otherness on a daily basis. Make a difference between the unclean and the clean, the verse says.
What do? Do we suddenly say, that book is because of it, so because of that book, get rid of the book, the people who read the book, paedophilia doesn't exist? Meanwhile, you've got Jeffrey Epstein with an island out there, flying people in and out of the island on a regular basis, under the radar, on a level that we cannot comprehend, doing the most sickest things that we cannot comprehend. Paedophilia, whether it be done through Catholicism, whether it be done through Protestants, whether it be done through Christianity, whether it be done through Islam,
It's sick.
is just that.
From baseball games to military funerals, we trekked across the country with neon protest signs in hand to tell others exactly how unclean they were and exactly why they were headed for damnation. This was the focus of our whole lives. This was the only way for me to do good in a world that sits in Satan's lap. And like the rest of my 10 siblings, I believed what I was taught with all my heart, and I pursued Westboro's agenda with a special sort of zeal.
So this week, renewed interest in whether serial pedophile Jeffrey Epstein killed himself in prison or whether he was offed by somebody who wanted him dead. A lot of people may fall into that category, given the number of high-profile people who partied with and may have partaken in his obsession with underage girls who say that they were sex slaves in his bizarre world. Then this video surfaces from Project Veritas in which ABC anchor Amy Robach says that ABC, quote, quashed her exclusive with Epstein accuser Virginia Giuffre, who said that she was forced to have sex with Prince Andrew when she was 17.
It is sick. It is dark. I find it hard to point a finger only at the people at the very top, which is creating this drip down low energy that has even made me feel like a bag of crap. Since I've come home from London, what I witnessed in various spots, as well as the positivity, but the low frequency dark energy that was displayed to us by the police and by people that are angry, by people that are criticising me on my own channel because they feel that I am ignorant, because my philosophy of let's do this peacefully, let's not climb over them Downing Street gates whilst we've got an armed policeman there with his finger on the trigger. I would not get over them gates before I was either tasered or shot. Now, for those people who want to say they will not fire on you unless you are a threat, what do you consider someone about to climb and scale the gates of 10 Downing Street? How do you think they are going to consider that?
And as you rightly point out, none of those hoops were jumped through with the Brett Kavanaugh story.
No, and ABC just got in big trouble for putting on fake Syrian war footage. Instead, It was a gun range in Kentucky. That doesn't look good. But also, this isn't being mentioned, but Hillary Clinton 3 years ago was in the midst of a presidential campaign. And if ABC drops a devastating blow against her husband in the midst of this campaign, that's going to blow back big on ABC News. Remember, they thought Hillary was going to win the White House, and they didn't want to jeopardize that relationship. They wanted to be on the right side of history. Now they're on the wrong side of history, and it's a tragedy.
So for all your righteousness of wanting to rip out every politician from Parliament, let's storm the building, it's the most inappropriate action you could do because they got the justification to put you on the floor.
In 2009, that zeal brought me to Twitter. Initially, the people I encountered on the platform were just as hostile as I expected. They were the digital version of the screaming hordes I'd been seeing at protests since I was a kid. But in the midst of that digital brawl, a strange pattern developed. Someone would arrive at my profile with the usual rage and scorn. I would respond with a custom mix of Bible verses, pop culture references, and smiley faces. They would be understandably confused and caught off guard, but then a conversation would ensue. And it was civil, full of genuine curiosity on both sides. How had the other come to such outrageous conclusions about the world?
Never mind your common law, never mind being pissed, never mind we have had enough. Low energy is not going to win against low energy. A higher self, realizing where we're at, going through the dark spots, listening to stories like this, and realizing who the enemy is.
Sometimes the conversation even bled into real life. People I'd sparred with on Twitter would come out to the picket line to see me when I protested in their city. A man named David was one such person. He ran a blog called Julicious, and after several months of heated but friendly arguments online, he came out to see me at a picket in New Orleans. He brought me a Middle Eastern dessert from Jerusalem, where he lives, and I brought him kosher chocolate and held a God Hates Jews sign. There was no confusion about our positions, but the line between friend and foe was becoming blurred. We'd started to see each other as human beings, and it changed the way we spoke to one another. It took time, but eventually these conversations planted seeds of doubt in me. My friends on Twitter took the time to understand Westboro's doctrines, and in doing so, they were able to find inconsistencies I'd missed my entire life.
I know who my enemy is. It's not Islam. It's not Catholicism. It's certainly not Judaism. It's not Christianity. It is the establishment.
Yeah, I mean, it also starts to raise those questions again. We've had sort of 3 different data points this week of people raising questions about whether or not Jeffrey Epstein took his own life. And when you go back and you look at this and you look at the people and, you know, some of the names that you mentioned who, you know, we know were on the plane and went to the island. We have no, you know, there's no evidence about, none of these women have said that they were with Bill Clinton, but it's, you know, part of the story that he was on that plane. Absolutely. So it raises questions about whether or not somebody had him killed. Michael Baden went on, and he is, you know, full disclosure, he's doing work for Jeffrey Epstein's brother, but he's a very renowned forensic scientist. He said that he saw signs that he was perhaps, that he didn't take his own life.
The people that rule and govern us, that are complicit, that are knowingly throwing all this under the radar. That goes from our monarchy, that goes for our police, our judicial system, right round.
It's sick.
All the failings that happen underneath that, we know what is above it.
Why did we advocate the death penalty for gays when Jesus said, "Let he who is without sin cast the first stone"? How could we claim to love our neighbor while at the same time praying for God to destroy them? The truth is that the care shown to me by these strangers on the internet was itself a contradiction. It was growing evidence that people on the other side were not the demons I'd been led to believe. These realizations were life-altering. Once I saw that we were not the ultimate arbiters of divine truth, but flawed human beings, I couldn't pretend otherwise. I couldn't justify our actions. especially our cruel practice of protesting funerals and celebrating human tragedy. These shifts in my perspective contributed to a larger erosion of trust in my church, and eventually it made it impossible for me to stay. In spite of overwhelming grief and terror, I left Westboro in 2012. In those days just after I left, the instinct to hide was almost paralyzing. I wanted to hide from the judgment of my family, who I knew would never speak to me again, people whose thoughts and opinions had meant everything to me. And I wanted to hide from the world I'd rejected for so long, people who had no reason at all to give me a second chance after a lifetime of antagonism. And yet, unbelievably, they did. The world had access to my past because it was all over the internet, thousands of tweets and hundreds of interviews, everything from local TV news to the Howard Stern show. But so many embraced me with open arms anyway. I wrote an apology for the harm I'd caused, but I also knew that an apology could never undo any of it. All I could do was try to build a new life and find a way somehow to repair some of the damage. People had every reason to doubt my sincerity, but most of them didn't. And given my history, it was more than I could have hoped for. Forgiveness and the benefit of the doubt. It still amazes me.
So what is above it is more of a problem rather than attacking on a low energy. Failings in the police doesn't mean the police are ultimately bad. There's elements within the police that know exactly what they're doing and are more than complicit in all this. It doesn't make the police per se bad. The people that govern the police, is that not the target? The people that are not pumping money into the police, is that not the target? The people who are telling the police what to prioritise and what not to prioritise, is that not the target? There's only so much low energy that people are gonna handle before that low energy spikes into a reaction. That reaction will become what I regard as problem, reaction, solution.
I mean, it also smacks of a lot of similarities of what we saw with the Weinstein story.
Right.
And I think that these institutions, these corporations need to ask themselves, who are we and what are we when this story comes to us and we don't air it? I mean, Virginia Roberts, you know, that story on what she had alone, the pictures she had of her and her story. How many stories do you see on ABC and NBC and everywhere where it's just, you know, this is her story. This is what she says. You know, you can back it up. You can investigate the other side of the story and say that we can't corroborate this. There's a lot of ways to get at a story like that.
So this low energy I'm seeing, this is playing into the hands of the establishment. It's not getting any nearer, even though the low energy is being caused by the overt actions of the establishment. But yet, because we're finding it hard to interpret it, because we're finding it hard to manifest in a positive way to combat this, we are lambs to the slaughter. This story from this anchor is nothing new. It's going to keep happening. There's going to be more stories that keep telling us the establishment not only know more, they're complicit in it, they are willfully, knowingly complicit in it. Who is the target? Let the comment section decide.
Everybody with common sense, Martha, knows that Epstein did not kill himself. Everybody knows that. This guy was wanted by many people. He was accused of blackmailing people. Remember, he had a picture of Bill Clinton in a blue dress, oil painting
an
in
oil
his
painting
mansion.
in his house, which is so weird.
Right. So check the flight records. We want to see who was on that plane, interview the pilot. These are questions that I think we need answers to. And the Department of Justice says they're doing an investigation into what happened to the prison. Because remember, the video cameras went down that we're looking at Epstein's cell. That just doesn't happen randomly.
Crazy. Yeah, there's too many crazy things there. We got to dig into it more.
That just doesn't happen randomly.
Crazy. Yeah, there's too many crazy things there. We got to dig into it more.
The cruelest thing I see at this moment in time is watching how people are reacting. Watching how distressful this is for people. the low energy that it seemingly causes. And it will do. That distresses me. Watching a population eat itself because it finds it hard to translate and to transcend this low energy. It's reacting to the low energy. This is women, this is men, this is boys, and this is girls. It is the saddest thing that you will ever see.
I've had the story for 3 years. I've had this interview with Virginia Roberts. We would not put it on the air. First of all, I was told, who's Jeffrey Epstein? No one knows who that is. This is a stupid story. Then the palace found out that we had her whole allegations about Prince Andrew and threatened us a million different ways.
I spent my first year away from home, adrift with my younger sister, who had chosen to leave with me. We walked into an abyss, but we were shocked to find light and a way forward in the same communities we targeted for so long. David, my Jewlicious friend from Twitter, invited us to spend time among a Jewish community in Los Angeles. We slept on couches in the home of a Hasidic rabbi and his wife and their 4 kids. The same rabbi that I'd protested 3 years earlier with a sign that said, "Your rabbi is a whore." We spent long hours talking about theology and Judaism and life while we washed dishes in their kosher kitchen and chopped vegetables for dinner. They treated us like family. They held nothing against us. And again, I was astonished. That period was full of turmoil, but one part I've returned to often is a surprising realization I had during that time, that it was a relief and a privilege to let go of the harsh judgments that instinctively ran through my mind about nearly every person I saw. I realized that now I needed to learn. I needed to listen.
I've never known a time in this movement where people are getting nudged and nudged towards a conclusion that they don't want. You get me 10 people who are going to storm the gates of Buckingham Palace, Houses of Parliament, 10 Downing Street. I'll stream it. I'll stream it. But you know what I'll be streaming? I'll be streaming you either getting shot or getting tasered. Then after taking my day off from work to come and stream, travel to London, I'll go home with footage that will be spectacularly sensational, but won't do a single thing. Apart from make people aware that that course of action is not going to combat this establishment. Knowledge, power, knowing who the enemy is. That's what's going to win this battle. That's what's going to win this dark aura that affects us all in our everyday life.
This has been at the front of my mind lately because I can't help but see in our public discourse so many of the same destructive impulses that ruled my former church. We celebrate tolerance and diversity more than at any other time in memory, and still we grow more and more divided. We want good things: justice, equality, freedom, dignity, prosperity. But the path we've chosen looks so much like the one I walked away from 4 years ago. We've broken the world into us and them, only emerging from our bunkers long enough to lob rhetorical grenades at the other camp. We write off half the country as out-of-touch liberal elites or racist, misogynist bullies. No nuance, no complexity, no humanity. Even when someone does call for empathy and understanding for the other side, the conversation nearly always devolves into a debate about who deserves more empathy. And just as I learned to do, we routinely refuse to acknowledge the flaws in our positions or the merits in our opponents. Compromise is anathema. We even target people on our own side when they dare to question the party line. This path has brought us cruel sniping, deepening polarization, and even outbreaks of violence. I remember this path. It will not take us where we want to go.
Whether that be the bills that you pay, the food that your kids consume, the TV that you allow your kids to watch, the movies, a touch button away, the music that is thrust upon us? Is that coming from any particular ideology or a book? Working out the target, staying on point, being positive, having a resolution, having a strategy is what's going to make this movement powerful. But the movement can't be powerful unless the individuals within it are powerful.
What gives me hope is that we can do something about this. The good news is that it's simple, and the bad news is that it's hard. We have to talk and listen to people we disagree with. It's hard because we often can't fathom how the other side came to their positions. It's hard because righteous indignation, that sense of certainty that ours is the right side, is so seductive. It's hard because it means extending empathy and compassion to people who show us hostility and contempt. The impulse to respond in kind is so tempting, but that isn't who we want to be. We can resist, and I will always be inspired to do so by those people I encountered on Twitter, apparent enemies who became my beloved friends.
So it has to start one by one individual at a time has to go through that empowerment stage, which means that you've got to suck up that low energy, like lemonade through a straw, digest it, whether it tastes good or not, but how you manifest from there, how you contain that low energy is a personal achievement of yourself, of your own red pilling journey, in order to be nothing but positive, knowledgeable and powerful at the other end. That is the ultimate goal for me, and that's what I'm striving for. Even if I make mistakes, I am going to make mistakes. We are all going to make mistakes. Knowledge is power. Positivity will override negativity. Them two things there combined, you could take the Downing Street, you could take Parliament, you can take the biggest police building. With that positivity, that knowledge, they can't touch that.
I found 4 things they did differently that made real conversation possible. These 4 steps were small but powerful, and I do everything I can to employ them in difficult conversations today. The first is, don't assume bad intent. My friends on Twitter realized that even when my words were aggressive and offensive, I sincerely believed I was doing the right thing. Assuming ill motives almost instantly cuts us off from truly understanding why someone does and believes as they do. We forget that they're a human being with a lifetime of experience that shaped their mind, and we get stuck on that first wave of anger, and the conversation has a very hard time ever moving beyond it. But when we assume good or neutral intent, we give our minds a much stronger framework for dialogue. The second is ask questions. When we engage people across ideological divides, asking questions helps us map the disconnect between our differing points of view. That's important because we can't present effective arguments if we don't understand where the other side is actually coming from, and because it gives them an opportunity to point out flaws in our positions. But asking questions serves another purpose. It signals to someone that they're being heard. When my friends on Twitter stopped accusing and started asking questions, I almost automatically mirrored them. Their questions gave me room to speak, but they also gave me permission to ask them questions and to truly hear their responses. It fundamentally changed the dynamic of our conversation. The third is stay calm. This takes practice and patience, but it's powerful. At Westboro, I learned not to care how my manner of speaking affected others. I thought my rightness justified my rudeness. Harsh tones, raised voices, insults, interruptions. But that strategy is ultimately counterproductive. Dialing up the volume and the snark is natural in stressful situations, but it tends to bring the conversation to an unsatisfactory, explosive end. When my husband was still just an anonymous Twitter acquaintance, Our discussions frequently became hard and pointed, but he always refused to escalate. Instead, he would change the subject. He would tell a joke or recommend a book or gently excuse himself from the conversation. We knew the discussion wasn't over, just paused for a time to bring us back to an even keel. People often lament that digital communication makes us less civil, but this is one advantage that online conversations have over in-person ones. We have a buffer of time and space between us and the people whose ideas we find so frustrating. We can use that buffer. Instead of lashing out, we can pause, breathe, change the subject, or walk away, and then come back to it when we're ready. And finally, make the argument. This might seem obvious, but one side effect of having strong beliefs is that we sometimes assume that the value of our position is or should be obvious and self-evident, that we shouldn't have to defend our positions because they're so clearly right and good, that if someone doesn't get it, it's their problem, that it's not my job to educate them. But if it were that simple, we would all see things the same way. As kind as my friends on Twitter were, if they hadn't actually made their arguments, it would have been so much harder for me to see the world in a different way.
Low energy, that is exactly what they want. They want to tap into your frequency. They want to lower your vibration in order to exacerbate you and give you no other option than feel violence is the only way. Hatred is the only way. That keeps you exactly where they want you. But hey ho.
We are all a product of our upbringing, and our beliefs reflect our experiences. We can't expect others to spontaneously change their own minds. If we want change, we have to make the case for it. My friends on Twitter didn't abandon their beliefs or their principles, only their scorn. They channeled their infinitely justifiable offense and came to me with pointed questions tempered with kindness and humor. They approached me as a human being, and that was more transformative than 2 full decades of outrage, disdain, and violence. I know that some might not have the time or the energy or the patience for extensive engagement, but as difficult as it can be, reaching out to someone we disagree with is an option that is available to all of us. And I sincerely believe that we can do hard things, not just for them, but for us and our future. Escalating disgust and intractable conflict are not what we want for ourselves or our country or our next generation.
That's how I'm playing it. Hope you resonate. If you don't, I understand. Everyone's on their own journey, and let's see 2 years down the line, containing all that low energy, containing all that negativeness inside. Let's see if you've been able to avoid grey hairs, avoid any diseases, avoid any ailments, avoid any breakups within your relationships, avoid any confrontations. Red Pill Phil, I love you all, even the pissing haters.
My mom said something to me a few weeks before I left Westboro, when I was desperately hoping there was a way I could stay with my family. People I have loved with every pulse of my heart since even before I was that chubby-cheeked 5-year-old, standing on a picket line holding a sign I couldn't read. She said, "You're just a human being, my dear, sweet child." She was asking me to be humble, not to question, but to trust God and my elders. But to me, she was missing the bigger picture, that we're all just human beings, that we should be guided by that most basic fact and approach one another with generosity and compassion. Each one of us contributes to the communities and the cultures and the societies that we make up. The end of this spiral of rage and blame begins with one person who refuses to indulge these destructive, seductive impulses. We just have to decide that it's going to start with us. Thank you.